For decades, the Persian Gulf had a set of unwritten rules. Yeah, tensions were always simmering, and proxy groups did the fighting, but direct state-on-state war, that was the one line nobody crossed. Well, in 2026, that line was completely erased. In this explainer, we're going to break down the sudden, dramatic shift that threw the entire region into a new, and honestly, a much more dangerous era. To really get just how massive this change was, you have to look back at Iran's core strategy. For years, its supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, played the long game. He practiced what you'd call strategic patience. He saw restraint, even when it was tough to swallow, as the only wise course of action. It was like drinking poison, sure, but it was all for the ultimate goal, making sure the regime survived. And that brings us right to the heart of what's happened. The old normal, that whole world of proxy wars and careful calculations, it's been totally thrown out the window. We've gone from a shadow war to open, direct attacks between nations. It is a completely unprecedented escalation, a new reality that has redrawn the entire conflict map of the Middle East. Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the shock of what happened in 2026, we first need to get a clear picture of what that old normal actually looked like. So for years, Iran's game was all about indirect influence. They built up what's often called the Shia Crescent, this arc of influence stretching from Iraq through Syria all the way to Lebanon. They did it by backing proxy groups, like the Houthis in Yemen or militants in Bahrain. In the Gulf itself, they used asymmetric tactics, think swarms of speedboats, to punch above their weight. But, and this is the absolute key, all of this was done while carefully, very carefully, avoiding a direct all-out war with the US or its allies. And then, in a single day, that entire strategic playbook was just shredded. Decades of carefully managed, simmering conflict just exploded into open warfare. It all went down on February 28, 2026. That morning, the US and Israel launched a joint missile strike inside Iran. Any ambiguity about the goal was gone by midday, when President Trump flat out said the objective was regime change. Well, Tehran's response wasn't that old strategic patience. Not at all. It was immediate and it was overwhelming. Within hours, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps unleashed a massive barrage of missiles and drones, hitting U.S. allies across the entire Gulf. The sheer scale of Iran's retaliation was something the region had never, ever seen before. This wasn't some deniable proxy attack. This was the full might of a national military being unleashed on its neighbors. The attacks were just relentless. Let's just look at the numbers, because they're staggering. Start with Bahrain, which hosts the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. In just over a month, its defenses had to shoot down 188 ballistic missiles. And as if that wasn't enough, on top of the missiles, the tiny island nation had to fight off nearly 500 attack drones. That is an incredible amount of fire for any country to absorb. But the assault on the United Arab Emirates, well, that was on a whole other level. In that same time frame, the UAE intercepted more than 500 ballistic missiles and an almost unbelievable 2,221 drones. I mean, you put those numbers together and you're looking at a coordinated and sustained offensive that is just mind-boggling. Now, what's really important to see here is that these weren't random shots in the dark. Iran's targets were chosen very carefully. They hit military nerve centers like the U.S. Fifth Fleet. They hit global economic hubs like Dubai's airport. They went after critical energy infrastructure like oil refineries, and even the digital backbone of the modern economy, data centers for companies like Amazon and Oracle. So on April 8th, after weeks of this unbelievable bombardment, the world basically let out a collective sigh of relief. A ceasefire was announced. But as we're about to see, it was a peace that existed only on paper. So the deal was officially made. The United States and Iran agreed to a ceasefire. It was supposed to stop the fighting, de-escalate everything. Officially, the war was over. Which, of course, brings us to the obvious question. If there was a ceasefire, why did the air raid sirens just keep on wailing? Well, the proof from the very first day is pretty damning. That morning, Iranian drones hit homes in Bahrain. Around 1 p.m., a drone slammed into Saudi Arabia's critical east-west oil pipeline. And all day long, the UAE was busy intercepting dozens more missiles and drones. This wasn't some fragile peace. It was no peace at all. And it wasn't just outside observers saying this. Even the highest levels of the U.S. military weren't buying it. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he called it exactly what it was, a pause. His forces were on high alert, ready to get back to fighting at a moment's notice. So all of this, the direct attacks, the ceasefire that never was, it's created a completely new reality in the Gulf. All the old assumptions are gone, and what's left is way more confrontational and way more dangerous. Just look at the UAE. For years, Dubai was this crucial economic lifeline for Tehran. It was a gateway that helped Iran get around sanctions. Well, not anymore. Abu Dhabi has completely flipped the script. Now they're waging economic war, arresting money changers tied to the IRGC, kicking out Iranian nationals, and shutting down Iranian businesses left and right. And this quote from a former Treasury strategist, it just says it all. He called Dubai the washing machine for Iran's dirty money. By shutting down that machine, the UAE is squeezing one of Iran's most important financial arteries. Ultimately, this new reality is all centered on the world's most critical choke point for oil, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's strategy there has a name, the Arch Defense. By controlling a few key islands, they can create these overlapping threat zones, basically forcing all ships into narrow channels where they're sitting ducks for missile boats and drones. This quote just nails it. Think about it. These tiny specks of land act as stationary and unsinkable aircraft carriers. It gives Iran immense power over the 30% of the entire world's seaborne oil that has to pass right through there. And here's the great irony in all of this. These attacks, which were probably meant to scare and divide Iran's neighbors, have done the exact opposite. They've pushed the Gulf states closer together, forging this new informal alliance that has one single crystal-clear goal: to break Iran's chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz. And that leaves us with one final, pretty sobering question. The old rules are dead, direct confrontation is the new normal, and now a new coalition is forming to challenge Iran's most critical strategic asset. So the question isn't if there will be a fight for the Strait of Hormuz, but whether the real battle